Today on Psycast, we're going to talk about a truth that stings more the longer you sit with it. Machiavelli was right. No one is really your friend. This episode is presented as a podcast with subtitles to help you follow at your own pace. Let me ask you something quietly. Have you ever felt like people are only close when it's convenient? Like affection is less about who you are and more about what you offer? That the warmth in someone's words changes almost imperceptibly when your value to them begins to fade. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded. It doesn't look like isolation. It looks like laughter that doesn't reach the eyes, messages that go unanswered a little too long, invitations that come only when you're needed, never when you're missed. It's the moment you realize maybe some of your closest relationships weren't built on love or loyalty, but on utility. It hurts to think this way, and maybe that's why we avoid it, because the thought that no one is truly your friend, that everyone's kindness has a price, feels cold, cynical, almost cruel. But what if it's not cruelty? What if it's clarity? Niccolo Machiavelli, often misunderstood as a prophet of manipulation, wasn't telling us to be heartless. He was revealing how hearts behave under pressure. In his book, The Prince, he wrote not about ideals, but about reality, about the way people act when fear, ambition, and power enter the room. And one of his most unsettling ideas was this: when survival is at stake, loyalty dissolves, affection evaporates. What remains is strategy. This doesn't mean people are evil, it means we're human. And humans, especially in systems built on status and scarcity, learn to protect themselves first. Let me share something I once read from Carl Jung. He said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And maybe one of those things is pretending relationships are unconditional, when deep down, we know they're not. We want to believe in love without agenda. But agendas often hide inside gestures. They wear the mask of generosity. They sound like concern. They feel like friendship. But underneath, they're contracts, silent ones. I'll be here for you, as long as you play your part. And that's the part no one says out loud. So how do we live with this? How do we walk through a world where loyalty can be a performance and affection a negotiation? First, we name it, because naming the truth gives us power, not over others, but over the illusions that keep us bound. Once you stop expecting permanent loyalty from temporary alliances, you begin to suffer less. You stop taking things so personally. You begin to see people's choices not as betrayals of you, but as expressions of who they are and what they fear. Imagine this. A friend pulls away after you lose your job, stops calling, stops including you. The old you might spiral, "Was I not good enough? What did I do wrong?" But the wiser you, the one who's seen the darker corners of human nature, might whisper, "This was never about me. This was about how my presence no longer served their story." That's not cynicism. That's emotional sobriety. Because here's the paradox. When you stop expecting others to be your safe place, you start becoming that place for yourself. And from that ground, real connections can actually grow. Not the kind built on mutual use, but on mutual knowing. Not, "I need you," but "I see you." You'll start to notice who stays when you have nothing to give, who listens without an angle, who shows up when no one's watching. These people exist, but they are rare. And you won't find them until you stop clinging to the illusion that everyone can be one of them. James Clear, in his book Atomic Habits, said, "You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems." I think the same is true for relationships. They don't rise to the level of your hopes. They fall to the level of your boundaries, of your discernment, of how clearly you see through the smile and still choose how close to stand. So no, maybe no one is truly your friend in the way we romantically imagine. But some people can walk beside you honestly, without pretending, without disguising need as love. And that is something more sacred than friendship as we've been taught. Shall we go further? Let me take you back, before politics, before performance, before power, to a quieter place, to a child, small and eager, standing in the doorway of a room where love lives, holding a drawing or a story or a question, waiting for a glance, waiting for a smile. We don't begin our lives trying to manipulate others. We begin by trying to matter. And very early on, we start to notice. Some versions of us are easier to love than others. Be quiet. Be helpful. Be polite. Don't be too loud. Don't be too sad. Smile. Say thank you. Make people proud. And every time love comes faster when we do these things, a pattern forms. A silent belief: if I want to be loved, I must be useful. If I want to belong, I must perform. Not just once, always. We become experts at reading the room, at anticipating needs, at becoming exactly what the moment asks for. Even if it costs us our truth, and the applause we get, it feels like safety. The praise, like proof we exist. So we keep going. We keep pleasing. We keep adjusting. But deep inside, a small voice begins to ask, if they only love the version of me that's helpful, what happens when I have nothing left to give? We don't ask it out loud, because the answer feels dangerous. And because by then, we've built entire identities around being the dependable one, the strong one, the fixer, the friend who never says no. But here's the thing. When we are taught that love is earned, we begin to fear what happens when we stop earning it. That's what fuels the fear of loneliness. Not the absence of people, but the terrifying thought that maybe, without our usefulness, we are invisible. We start to think we are only lovable as long as we are needed, that our worth has an expiration date, tied to our productivity, our generosity, our ability to say yes. And so we tolerate relationships that drain us. We accept crumbs of attention as meals. We keep showing up for people who only remember us when they're hungry, for help, for comfort, for something we've always given. Because walking away feels like risking emotional extinction, like stepping into the cold where no one is waiting, where no one comes looking for you unless you're carrying something for them. But here's what no one tells you when you're young. Love that must be earned is not love. It's approval dressed in affection. It's transaction wrapped in tenderness. And yes, sometimes that's all people can give. But you don't have to keep living in a house where your presence is only welcome when it's useful. You can walk away, even if it's quiet, even if no one follows, because your value isn't a role. It isn't a service. It isn't what you do for others when they don't want to do for themselves. It's in your being, in your breath, in your ability to sit alone and still know, I exist, I matter, I don't need to be performing right now. And from that stillness, something new begins to grow, something more real. But let me hold that thought. Let's return to where we were. Ready? Let me tell you what begins to change when you accept this view, not with bitterness, but with quiet acceptance. You stop chasing closure from people who never saw you fully. You stop bending yourself into shapes just to be liked. You stop offering pieces of your soul as currency in a marketplace of attention. Because when you understand that relationships are often transactional, you gain the clarity to choose which transactions are worth it. Some will still be beautiful, reciprocal, even healing, but you'll enter them with your eyes open, not wide shut in hope. And slowly, you begin to understand the real power of solitude. Not the kind that isolates, but the kind that inoculates. You start to realize that your value doesn't depend on how many people want something from you. It depends on how well you've learned to sit in your own presence and still feel whole. I remember once reading a line by Søren Kierkegaard. Don't forget to love yourself. Simple words, almost too soft for the world Machiavelli described. But maybe that's the answer. Not in opposition to Machiavelli, but as a counterweight. Because if the world often sees you as useful, then your job is to not forget that you're also sacred. Even when no one is looking. Even when no one is calling. You are not the role you play in someone else's story. You are not the value you bring to a table that disappears the moment you're empty-handed. You are a whole story, a quiet force, a presence that doesn't need to prove anything. And from that place, you'll start to see the difference between those who love your light and those who just needed your fire to stay warm. So here's what I hope you take with you. It's not wrong to want loyalty or to long for real friendship. Those are human needs, soft, honest, and rooted in something ancient inside us. But it's dangerous to confuse need with truth. And the truth is, Not everyone who stands beside you is standing for you. And that's okay. Because once you accept that not everyone is your friend, you create room to find the ones who truly are. The ones who don't need you to shine brighter for them to feel seen. The ones who stay when you falter. Who don't withdraw love when your usefulness runs out. Who don't treat your presence like a transaction. Those people, you'll recognize them not by how loudly they speak, but by how gently they stay. So, be kind. But don't be naive. Be open, but don't be blind. And most of all, be your own safest place first. Because when you're no longer desperate to be chosen, you finally learn to choose. And maybe that's what Machiavelli couldn't say in his World of Power and Princes. That the real strength is not in control, or in manipulation, or even in loyalty. The real strength is in knowing who you are when no one needs you, and still being someone worth knowing. I'll leave you with this thought. Not everyone is your friend, but those who are don't need a reason to be, and that is enough.